Hello everyone. As I said in my last video on my research here in Tokyo, spring is well underway here in Japan, and so I thought it was time to start our journey through that season as it is conceived and expressed in Waka. I'm going to structure these videos as I have the ones on autumn and winter, and divide the season up into various topic areas which I'll address in turn. Spring was, and is, one of the most clement seasons in Japan, with a preponderance of bright clear days and gradually rising temperatures as it progresses. Of course, there is also new growth, including blossom on the trees and changes in animals' behaviour too, so there are many ways in which the change can be noted and described. In this video, I'm going to start by talking about Waka, which conceptualise the season in a slightly more abstract sense, before moving on to discuss spring weather phenomena, always an important feature of Waka aesthetics. So, let's get started. Our first topic is the beginning or arrival of spring, Rishun in Japanese. This topic always started off the spring section of Imperial and other Waka anthologies, marking out its importance. There seems no better poem to begin with than the very first poem on this topic in an Imperial anthology. Composed on a day when spring arrived in the old year. Toshi no uchi, haru wa ki ni keri, hito toshi o, kozo to yaiwan, kotoshi to yaiwan. Within the year, spring has come again. The 1 year. What should I say? That it's last year, or that it's the year to come? Motokatta's poem addresses a common issue in early Japan, the mismatch between the calendrical and meteorological seasons. Japan used the lunar calendar at this time, which meant that the calendrical date could either fall behind or race ahead of the season it was supposed to mark. The beginning of the first month, the first day of which was the official first day of spring, generally fell in early to mid-February, but it could potentially fall in mid to late January or late February. In the former case, winter would still have the capital in its grasp, while in the latter, spring would already be well underway. And this is the situation that Motokatta is describing. Signs of spring are everywhere, weather warming, birds singing and so forth, but the calendar still remains in the 12th month, and thus officially the season is winter. The beginning of spring, though, was a topic addressed by Japanese poets long before Kokinshu. In fact, work on the subject can be found in the 8th century Manyoshu anthology, such as a miscellaneous poem on the beginning of spring. Hisakata no ama no kaguyama, kono yube kasumi tanabiku, haru tatsu rashimo. Upon eternal, heavenly fragrant Mount Kagu, this evening the haze trails across and spring seems to have arrived indeed. Mount Kagu, Kaguyama, although it's almost universally referred to as Ama no Kaguyama, Heavenly Mount Kagu, is a small mountain lying to the northeast of Asuka, where the Japanese court was based before the establishment of a permanent capital at Nara at the beginning of the 8th century. You can get some good views of it from parts of Asuka Historical Park, and the mountain can be hiked up these days, if you're in the area and have transport. Its name contains the character for fragrance, hence my translation. In the poem, the anonymous poet describes the mountain on a spring evening, where mists rise from the mountain's forests in the cool of the evening after a warmer spring day. Haze continued to be a symbol of the beginning of spring, as we see in the first poem in the 8th Imperial Anthology, Shinkokinshu. Composed on the conception of the beginning of spring. Miyoshi no wa yama mo kazumite, shirayuki no furinishi sato ni haru wa ki ni keri. In fair Yoshino, the mountains are all hazed, and where white snows fell on the estate, spring has come. The poet here is Fujiwara no Yoshitsune, organiser of the poetry contest in 600 rounds, and this is an altogether more technically complex piece of work than those we've already seen, not surprising given its later date. Yoshitsune begins with an utamakura, a poetically significant place name, and refers to Yoshino, which is most closely associated with the most well-known botanical emblem of spring, the cherry blossom, as there are large numbers of cherry trees on the mountains in the area. I've never been fortunate enough to visit the place myself, but from pictures and film I've seen, in spring it's truly spectacular. In any case, the haze Yoshitsune is referring to is both mist, but also the cherry blossom which blurs the shape of the mountain when viewed. The blossoms don't last long, as I'm sure you know, and it's a common Waka conceit to compare their scattering to snow falling, and so the winter snow which fell also foreshadows the cherry blossoms which are going to fall. The poem ends with an almost triumphant proclamation of the arrival of spring, which makes it a fitting one to start the anthology off. One of the most common features of weather in spring in Japan, and thus an emblem of the season, is the way the temperature will, to use a colloquial term, yo-yo between warmer and colder days. I'm seeing that myself here in Tokyo at the moment, where today it's about 12 degrees centigrade, that's about 54 Fahrenheit, when yesterday temperatures reached 21 degrees, that's just a tad under 70 Fahrenheit. This phenomenon was addressed in Waka under the topic of returning chill, sae kaeru, although there are instances where this phrase was used about seasons other than spring. For example, from among his winter poems. Shuguretsuru yoi no murasame sae kaeri, fukeyuku kaze ni arare furu nari. Showering, tonight the cloudbursts bring returning chill, and amidst the gusting wind, hailstones fall. Here, Iyataka, writing at the beginning of the 13th century, situates the return of chill as a winter phenomenon. Some 50 years later, however, Fujiwara no Tameuji wrote on the conception of lingering cold. Sae kaeri yamakaze aruru toki wa gini, furi mo tamaranu haru no awa yuki. Chill returns and the mountain winds rage, upon the evergreens falls but fails to linger the frothy snow of spring. Here, the returning chill is clearly situated as part of spring, and subsumed into a broader spring topic which covered much the same ground, lingering cold, or yokan in Japanese. This topic dwelt strongly on how the weather could remain cold and wintry even though spring had officially arrived, and was a popular one amongst Waka poets. For example, Shigaraki no Toyama wa yuki mo kie ni shio, fuyu o nokosu ya tani no yu kaze. From Shigaraki's mountains the snow has gone, yet does winter remain in the valley's evening breeze. Shigaraki, which Kenso puts at the beginning of his poem, is an utamaka referring to a mountainous area to the southeast of Kyoto. Due to this landscape, it had a reputation as a place where the snow in winter would be particularly deep, and thus spring would come late. In this poem, though, even the snows of Shigaraki have gone, but the wind remains cold, bringing the poet a memory of the cold of winter. Here's another poem on the same topic, also from the poetry contest in 600 rounds. Kasumi aezu nao furu yuki ni sora tojite, haru mono fukaki uzumibi no moto. No trace of haze, and still the falling snow seals the sky. Spring lies deep amongst the buried embers. I find this quite an affecting poem. It's easy to imagine the poet, huddled over his brazier on a spring day, looking in vain for the haze, a sign of spring, but finding only falling snow outside, with the only hint of warmth coming from the coals in the brazier before him. Shunze, the judge of the contest, awards both of these poems a win in their rounds, although he criticises Kensho's mention of evening because, he says, it is mornings which are colder at this time of year. Spring couldn't remain cold forever, and as I said at the beginning, we get some warm weather here too. There was even a specific term in Waka which was used to describe things which seemed properly spring-like, harumeku, as in, for a folding screen at the residence of Minister of the Right Tsunesuke. Nobe mireba wakanatsu mikeri, mubeshi koso kaki no kusa mo harumeki ni keri. When I gaze upon the meadows and have picked fresh herbs, indeed, indeed, the grasses along my brushwood fence have grown most spring-like. Here, Tsurayuki refers at the beginning of his poem to a common aristocratic pastime. Going out at the beginning of the year, the set day was the 7th of the first month, and picking a particular combination of 7 plants which were used to make a medicinal broth which was drunk at the beginning of the year to improve people's health for the remainder of it. The plants were seri, water dropwort, nazuna, shepherd's purse, gogyo, cudweed, hakobera, chickweed, hotoke no za, henbit, suzuna, kabu, turnip, and suzushiro, daikon, or Japanese radish. The reason these plants were chosen was for their names rather than their intrinsic qualities, nutritional or medicinal. Seri led to good fortune in competition, also seri. Nazuna evoked rubbing, nazu, one's pollution away. Gogyo evoked the body of the Buddha, as this was an alternative sense of the characters used to write its name. Hakobera, broad, hakobu, prosperity, while hotoke no za literally meant the seat of the Buddha, and so was propitious. Suzuna evoked the bell, suzu, rung at shrines to attract the deity's attention. And finally, suzushiro could also mean no impurities. So, as you can see, all of these plants have names that invoke different kinds of good fortune, and thus consuming them was thought to bring this kind of good luck for the coming year. As I've already mentioned, one of the features of spring weather in Japan is bright sunshine and clear days. Although looking out the window today at the cloudy sky, one could be forgiven for thinking that that was a myth. It's no surprise then that the spring sun, Haru no Hi, was a major topic for Waka composition and makes an early appearance in Kokinshu. The head note for this poem is, at a time when the Nijo Empress, that's Koshi, was known as the mother of the Crown Prince, on the 3rd day of the 1st month, he was summoned to her presence. While giving her orders, she commanded him to compose a poem on the snow falling upon his head while the sun was shining. Haru no hi no hikari ni ataru ware nare no kashira no yuki to naru zo wabishiki. The spring sun's light strikes me, but the snow upon my brow saddens. Yasuhide makes a contrast between the bright spring sunshine, a symbol of the arrival of the new year, but also that he has got another year older, as symbolised by the increasing grey in his hair, the snow upon his brow. The spring sun continued to be a piece of poetic diction widely used by poets, occurring in Gosenshu, the second imperial anthology, where sun, hi, is used in an alternate sense to mean day. Sent to a woman. Haru no hi no nagaki omoi wa wasureji o hito no kokoro ni aki ya tatsuramu. Springtime's days of lengthy passion I will not forget, but within my lady's heart has sated autumn arisen perhaps. The anonymous author of this poem cleverly links the seasons of spring, associated with new growth and, of course, mating, and autumn, which has the opposite connotations. In this, he is assisted by the homophony between aki, autumn, and aki, be sated, have had enough of. The spring sun could also be used metaphorically, as Seishonagon does in this poem, which is in reply to one from her empress, Sadako, Teishi, which she sent when Sei had to leave her for a few days. The empress poem essentially says that she'll miss Sei and be bored without her company. So Sei responds, Kumo no ue mo kurashi kanekeru haru no hi o tokoro gara tomo nagame tsuru kana. Above the clouds there can be no darkness with the springtime sun. How fitting for this place that long have I gazed upon it. In her poem, above the clouds is a standard metaphor for the palace, while the springtime sun is a reference to Sadako. Sei is expressing her thanks for, to use an expression from Jane Austen, the Empress' kind condescension. That is, she feels honoured that the Empress would deign to say that she would miss her presence, and indeed it was a kind gesture, but considering that Sadako was probably barely 20 at this time and Sei was one of her closest attendants, perhaps it's not surprising. We can also see the spring sun being used to set the scene in poems which focus on other topics, such as this one from Shinkokinshu. Composed on the bridge at Nagara. Haru no hi no Nagara no hama ni fune tomete, izure ka hashi to toedo kotaenu. In the springtime sun, at the bridge of Nagara, I halted my boat. Where is the bridge? I asked, yet answer came there none. The bridge of Nagara is an utamakura which lies more or less in the heart of modern Osaka, and its key and most famous quality was that the bridge itself had collapsed and was no longer there, except for the odd remnant, by the time poets started composing waka about it, hence the final line of Eigyo's poem. He's using the contrast between the connotations of the bright new spring sunshine with the ruined and vanished bridge, whose time has gone, to add extra depth to his poem. We can see a similar use for the spring sun in this poem by the monk Doin, composed when he had gone to the bay at Tago. Tago no ura no kaze mo nodokeki haru no hi wa kasumizo nami ni tachiwarikeru. On the bay at Tago, the wind is gentle, as is the springtime sun. Into haze the waves turn as they break. The bay at Tago, Tago no ura, had been a famous poetic location since Manyo times, as it's mentioned in one of the most well-known of all waka by Yamabe no Akahito, describing the sound of Mount Fuji from the sea. Tago no ura yu uchi irete mireba, mashiro ni zo, Fuji no takane ni yuki wa furikeru. From the bay at Tago, I see, when gazing out, pure white, on the heights of Fuji's peak, the snow has fallen. Given how well known this poem was, it's almost inevitable that it would have been at the back of the mind of anyone hearing Tago mentioned in another poem. So there's an implicit contrast in Doin's poem between the majestic snow-capped mountain, which is present but not explicitly mentioned, and the gentleness of the spring sun on the waves. The waves themselves are producing haze, another symbolic marker of spring. Finally on this subject, here's a poem on the topic of rain on a spring evening, which makes clever use of a reference to the spring sun to emphasize a contrast with other weather conditions. Rain on a spring evening. Tsurezure to ame furikurasu haru no hi wa tsune yori nagaki mono ni zo arikeru. Idly, the rain falls, darkening the springtime sun. How much longer than normal it does seem to last. Here, Yoshiko uses the central reference to the spring sun, with its strong connotations of brightness, to create a powerful counterpoint with the rain which has darkened it. Speaking from personal experience, I know what she means. One gets used to the bright spring days here, and so when clouds and rain do appear, they seem especially unexpected and shocking, and do seem to drag on interminably. The passage of the sun, of course, marks different times of day, and there was one time of day which was particularly strongly associated with spring, the dawn, akebono. This association was, well, one could almost say codified by Seishonagon, who chose to begin her pillow book with the simple statement, Haru wa akebono, which literally translates as spring, the dawn. What she means by this, of course, is in spring, the dawn is the most affecting time of day, and this association was reinforced and restated by countless waka poets after her. Here's a few examples. Hana no iro wa kasumi no hima ni hono miete, yama no hani o haru no akebono. The blossom's hues between the shifting haze I briefly glimpse, and the mountain's edges glow with the dawn in springtime. This is a quite late 15th century waka, which shows how thoroughly the link between dawn and spring had become part of the canon by this point. Goshuko links blossom, haze and the dawn to paint a picture with his words of how the light of dawn creates a diffuse glow of colour as it touches the cherry blossoms along the edges of the mountains. 300 years earlier, cloistered Prince Shukaku linked other spring symbols together to produce another powerful statement on spring. Topic unknown. Mumegae no hana ni kotsutao uguisu no koe sae ni o haru no akebono. A branch of plum blossom tells me this: the bush warbler's very voice does shine at the dawn in springtime. The bush warbler is the bird most closely associated with spring, although it is its song which is heard rather than the bird being seen. Shukaku links the bird's song with the whiteness of the plum blossom appearing in the dawn light. Both are symbols of early spring, just as dawn is the beginning of the day. Here's another poem, this one by Fujiwara no Shunzei, the most famous poet of his age. When he composed 5 poems at the house of the regent and grand minister. Mataya min katano no mino no sakuragari hano no yuki chiru haru no akebono. When might I see the like again? In Katano's august field in search of cherry, a blizzard of blossom falls this spring dawn. Katano was an imperial hunting ground, hence the reference to it being august, and Shunzei links the hunting for game, gari, which went on there, with the search for cherry blossoms, while simultaneously bringing in the blossom's resemblance to snow and the dawn too. The poem is positively packed with imagery, all of which combine to heighten its overall impact and effect. Here's another spring dawn poem, which emphasises the dawn as a liminal point between night and day through its imagery. A spring poem from when he composed a 50-poem sequence at the residence of cloistered Prince Shukaku. Yama no ha mo sora mo hitotsu ni miyuru kana, kore ya kasumeru haru no akebono. The mountain's edge and the sky too as one do seem. This is the hazy dawn in springtime. I think you could almost see the mountains and sky coming into focus gradually as the dawn brightens and more light fills the sky, can't you? It was also possible for poets to describe specific locations at dawn in spring. Topic unknown. Kokoro aramu shito no tame to ya kasumuran naniwa no mitsu no haru no akebono. For sensitive folk's sake, do you seem to haze? At Mitsu in Naniwa, the dawn in springtime. Here, Gotoba obviously feels that Mitsu will be well enough known to the audience for his poem that they don't need anything more than a mention of it to recall its appearance in the spring dawn. His initial mention of sensitive folk, kokoro aram shito, is almost a challenge. Obviously, if you're not a person of sensitivity, able to understand the world of Waka, you won't understand what his poem is about. So, if you don't recognise the connotations of Mitsu, then you are ruling yourself out of the in-group. Finally, just to show that occasionally there were poems which challenged the dominance of akebono as the term for dawn in spring Waka, here's a poem by Sanuki, a court lady. From the poetry contest in 1500 rounds. Ima wa tote haru no ariake ni chiru hana ya tsuki ni mo oshiki mine no shiraku mo. Is now the time that, in the spring dawn with the blossom scattering, the moon too regrets leaving the white clouds round the peaks. She uses ariake in her poem because it refers to a slightly earlier dawn period when the moon is still in the sky, and that matches the sense of her poem. Before the dawn, of course, comes the night. The principal season of the year associated with night, or rather the brevity of it, was summer, but that's not to say that spring nights weren't a topic for composition. For example, composed on plum blossom on a spring night. Haru no yo no yame wa ayanashi ume no hana, iro koso miene kaya wa kakururu. On nights in springtime, how strange the darkness is. The plum blossoms' hues do go unseen, but can their scent still be concealed? In this poem from Kokinshu, Oshikochi no Mitsune focuses on one of the early symbols of spring, the plum blossom, and takes a pose of confusion, wondering if the night's darkness will hide the blossom's scent. Of course, both he and the audience know the answer, but to that question is no. Here's another spring night poem from Gosenshu. Topic unknown. Nerarenu o shiite waga nuru haru no yo no yume o tsutsu ni nasu yoshi mo ga na. Unable to sleep, I forced myself to bed. A spring night's dream into reality might thus be turned. Why does the night here have to be spring? Well, spring here is being used as a metaphor for the start of a relationship. The anonymous author, who could be either a man or a woman, is forcing themselves to sleep in the hopes that the dreams they will have of the person they love will turn into the reality of being able to meet in person. But the relation has not yet started, and thus spring, the season of new beginnings, is appropriate. Composed on the scent of plum blossom at night. Mume gae ni kaze ya fukuran, haru no yo wa ora no sode sae nioi nuru kana. Are the plum tree's branches being blown by the wind? On a night in springtime, even unfolded sleeves give forth the scent. This poem from Kinyoshu, the 5th imperial anthology, shows that the link between plum blossom and spring nights was still being made some 150 years after Kokinshu. Nagafusa, though, goes a bit further, suggesting that the plum scent may not be from trees at all, but from the incense that an aristocrat used to perfume their clothes. The insides of Heian aristocratic dwellings were quite dim, and even more so at night, so lovers rarely caught sight of each other and would often recognise each other by the particular perfume of their clothing. It was also a custom for people to wave or beckon with their sleeves, which would obviously waft the scent from their robes about. Here, Nagafusa is speculating that a lady may be beckoning him closer one spring night in order to start an affair. Another 100 years later, at the time of the 8th anthology, Shinkokinshu, spring night poems were still being composed. When he composed a 50-poem sequence for cloistered Prince Shukaku. Haru no yo no yume no ukihashi to daeshite mine ni wakaruru yokogumo no sora. A spring night's floating bridge of dreams is broken. Split by the peaks, the long clouds trail across the sky. Here, Taker works in a reference to Genji Monogatari. The Floating Bridge of Dreams, Yume no Ukihashi, is the title of the final chapter in the work, but he links that with the image of the clouds being broken by the mountains. I can read quite a lot into this, which is perhaps not surprising, given that Taker is such an accomplished poet. There is the straightforward description of the clouds and mountains. There's the Genji reference. In the chapter, Kaora's dreams of a reunion with Ukifune come to nothing, just as she resolves to continue on the path of being a nun. There's also the poet sleeping only fitfully and waking early to gaze at the sky. The idea of the fitfulness of sleep on a spring night is something that the Shinkokinshu compilers obviously found attractive, because in the second book of spring poems in the anthology we have Topic Unknown. Imo yasuku nerare zari keri haru no yo wa hana no chiru nomi yume ni mietsutsu. Easy sleep has eluded me. On a spring night, the scattering of blossoms alone does ever fill my dreams. Even though Mitsune was a Kokinshu period poet, the Shinkokinshu compilers have included his poem in their anthology as it fits well with the conception of spring nights as being a time when one wouldn't sleep soundly. Finally in this section, here's a poem linking the night with the dawn that means its end. Composed on morning haze for the poetry contest at the residence of the Kyogoku regent. Haru no yo no oborozuki yo ya kore naramu kasumi ni komoru ariake no sora. Is a spring night's misty moon this I see? Haze is clouding the dawning sky. Tango's main focus, as you can tell from the headnote, is the haze rather than the spring night itself. Nevertheless, it's a fitting introduction to both her central query about whether she can see the moon at all, and also the description of the haze which is causing the puzzlement, and is also a core element of spring's weather. Unlike with the night in other contexts though, as I hope you will realise if you think of the poems I have just discussed, spring nights are not used, even by implication, to suggest the end of spring or of anything else. a core sense of spring as a time for beginnings outweighs any temptation poets may have generally had to use night in that sense. With that being said, Waka poets did address the progress of the season. Many of the poems we've looked at so far have been from the beginning of the season, when the weather might turn back to wintry conditions, but sooner or later, of course, the season will become fully established. And this is where the diction and topic of being deep in spring, haru fukashi, comes in. For example, on a folding screen for the coming-of-age ceremony of the Empress. Haru fukaku narinu tomo wo sakurabana, chiru kono moto wa mada yuki zo furu. Deep indeed has spring become, I feel, when cherry blossom scatters around the feet of the trees, so snow is still a-falling. As I'm sure you recognise, Tsurayuki equates spring, being in full swing, so to speak, with the falling of the cherry blossoms. The end of the blossoms means new leaves on the trees, and so this is apt, but his focus, perhaps unsurprisingly, is on the fallen blossoms themselves, covering the ground like a new fall of snow. This is an emphasis which we see repeated by other poets. For example, topic unknown. Chiru hana ni seki tomeraruru yamakawa no fukaku mo haru no nari ni keru kana. Fallen blossoms have completely dammed the mountain stream, so deep has spring become. Here, Yoshinobu links the depth of spring cleverly with the stream's depths, which are blocked, and associates this with the sheer quantity of fallen cherry blossom. The depths element of deep in spring could also be associated with other things, as we see in this poem by Jien. In a 100-poem sequence, which he presented at the Hiyoshi Shrine. Haru fukaki nodera tachikomuru yugasumi tsutsumi nokoseru kane no oto kana. Deep in springtime, all around a temple among the meadows arises evening haze, lingering to envelop the tolling of the bell. In this poem, yes, spring is well underway, but so too is the temple well out in the meadows, and thus surrounded by all the new growth of spring. Simultaneously, it's also deep within the haze which has appeared on the evening in question, enveloping it and muffling the sound of the bell tolling at sunset. And sunset brings us to the end of the day, and the last topic in this video, departing spring, Yukuharu. Poets addressed this topic in a number of ways and used a variety of diction. For example, we have this early poem from Kokinshu. At a time when she was unwell and suffering, thinking that it might be caused by the wind, she kept the shutters closed. At this time, she saw how some cherry blossom, which had been picked and put in a vase, scattered and composed Tare komete haru no yukue mo shiranu ma ni machishi sakura mo utsuroi ni keri. While closed in and of the progress of spring all unknowing, these long-awaited cherries too have faded. Here, Yoruka cleverly blends the phrase haru no yuku, spring departs, into the expression haru no yukue, which I've translated here as the progress of spring. So she's able to imply that the progress of spring is towards its end. This is reinforced, of course, by the reference to the cherry blossoms fading. In this next poem, we do see a familiar link made between the evening of the day and the end of the season. Topic unknown. Oshime domo haru no kagiri no kyou no mata yugure ni sae nari ni keru kana. I regret it, yet the limit of spring has come. Today, once more, evening truly has arrived. The end of spring has various markers, some of which Emperor Sutoku mentions in this poem. Composed on the conception of the end of spring when he composed a 100-poem sequence. Hana wa ne ni tori wa furusu ni kaeru nari, haru no tamari o shiru shito no zo naki. Blossoms to the roots and birds to their nests of old return. Where spring's lodging lies knows no one at all. Here, that the season is ending is not explicitly described. Instead, Shutoku mentions the disappearance of blossom and the changing behaviour of birds, things which even a capital aristocrat, divorced from anything but cultivated and controlled nature, would recognise as a symbolic shift. Shutoku's poem was well known and prestigious enough, given that it was composed by an emperor, that later poets would rely upon it to reinforce and support their own work. For example, Jakuren builds on the idea of people not knowing where spring has gone in this poem, when he presented a 50-poem sequence. Kurete yuku haru no minato wa shirane domo, kasumi ni yotsuru uji no shibabune. Departing spring's home port lies, I know not where, yet beneath the haze boats carry firewood on the Uji River. He also cleverly links the beginning and end of the poem with the departure of spring, suggesting the departure of the boats laden with their cargo. There's also an earlier poem by Kino Tsurayuki, Kokinshu 5311, which refers to autumn's port, Akiya Minatoya Aki. So, for those in the know, Jakuren is building on that foundation in the canon to extend the image from autumn to spring too. As you'll have perhaps already worked out, the predominant emotion which Waka expressed about the end of spring was regret, and sometimes poets made this explicit. A poem from the poetry contest held by the Empress Dowager during the reign of the Kampyo Emperor. Mate toyu ni tomoranu mono to shirinagara shite zo shiki haru no akare wa. Asking it to stay when that it will not remain, I know too well, and yet how strongly I regret parting from spring. It's not surprising, perhaps, that this should be the emotion expressed, as the end of spring presaged the coming of summer with its damp and oppressive heat. Finally, let's have a poem on the end of spring where the poet expresses his envy that he cannot depart with the spring, but must linger and experience the coming summer. On the end of spring, at a beach. Haru no nagori nagamuru ura no yunagi ni kogi wakare yuku fune mo uramashi. A memento of spring brings comfort on the beach where, in the evening calm, rowing away from me, the boats I do envy so. Tamekane links the departing boats with the departure of spring, expressing both longing for spring to remain and envy of the freedom which the boats represent. He knows, of course, that both emotions are futile, but cannot help expressing them. That's the end of the first part of our consideration of spring in Waka. I hope you found it interesting. You'll have noticed, I'm sure, that I've accompanied some of the poems this time with artwork, and knowing that a talent for such things is not something that I possess, will have worked out that I've been experimenting with seeing how AI art generators respond to Waka as prompts. Some of the image are the AI's first attempt at understanding the poems. For a few, I tweaked the prompt when I felt that something significant had been missed. I did see what one of the AIs made of the original pre-modern Japanese versions. The answer to that is a combination of okay and wildly barking up the wrong tree. One of the poems mentioned in Cherry Blossoms created several images of koi carp swimming in a flower-filled bowl, for example. So I think there's a way to go yet. I may be doing some more considered and thoughtful experimentation with this later in the year. Keep your eyes open for that if you're interested. That's it for today. Tomorrow, I'm off to Toyama to see an exhibition on the Hyakunin Isshu exemplary poetry collection. If I'm able, I'll put together a video about it and bring that out in due course. As ever, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments and subscribe to this channel for more Waka related updates. See you soon.